Good morning, good evening. Welcome, everybody, from around the world, wherever you may be today. Thanks for joining the fourth installment of Salesforce Bookshelf with myself and my co host, Chelyn. Today, we have a very special guest, of course, and to talk about her book, Pei Mun Lim is here to talk about Salesforce Discovery 101 with us. We have a rather interesting conversation today, not just about Salesforce Discovery, but some of the soft skills related to being a Salesforce consultant and working through some troubled spots with your clients and engagements. Pei Mun, would you take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Joseph, can I just say that you're one of the very, very few people who actually call me by my Chinese name properly. So thank you so much. I am very grateful that you took the effort to do that. So I have been in the consulting space for a really long time, about 30 years, starting in the Microsoft space. I was working with Microsoft partners of all shapes and sizes. I was a systems engineer. I was a SQL DBA. I was a CRM consultant when Microsoft Dynamics CRM came out. And I became a project manager. And around 2014, I moved over to Salesforce, but I stayed as a PM because actually, ironically, of Trailhead, there were so many people who could skill up on the product, and it's such a game changer. So that's kind of where I have been. I've been delivering projects with consulting partners like IBM and Capgemini. And in 2020, around the pandemic, I decided to start my own company called Then How Academy. The reason was that I could see quite a lot of people who were skilling up on the product, but not so many know how and when to implement projects properly. And so that's how I came about to doing what I'm doing today, which is I train consultants for Salesforce partners. I also consult with partners on their internal delivery and processes from sales to delivery to post go live, which I'm enjoying very much.
All right. Well, I'm gonna dive right in. Thanks for telling our audience a little bit about you and your background. Shalyn and I are gonna skip that part. They hopefully know us by now. It's episode 4, and there is a episode where you can get to know the two of us as your hosts. Available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts everywhere. Pei Mun, what inspired you to write Salesforce Discovery, and why do you believe that that phase is critical for project success?
Well, the, the reason why I decided to focus on discovery was because I have seen projects done really well. And when someone comes to me and say, we have Salesforce and it's awful, most of the time I will go straight to, well, did you have a good discovery? Did you talk to your partner or your internal team? How did that process pan out? And through lots of discussion, I have discovered that actually a lot of projects that turn red, which means that has trouble completing properly, if it was sold if it was sold well, is usually because discovery hasn't been done well enough, and that's the thing that causes so much heartache and pain. And I decided to focus on that in terms of writing the book because I felt that that was the biggest impact I could make as quick as possible. So if people read about how to do it properly, that I felt was a game changer for making projects more successful and more fun for consultants and for the end user to actually engage in.
Maybe we could take just a step back for those who just aren't as familiar. Maybe they're newer into consulting or not familiar with what that concept of discovery is. Could you just explain that a little bit more for somebody just getting started of what that involves?
Yes, thank you very much, Chelyn. A discovery is where, let's start with an analogy. So if someone had pains in their heart, right, and they go to a doctor and say, hey, doctor, I've Googled my problem. I think I actually need a new heart. Can you go and get me a new heart, please? And it needs to be somebody who's been in a gym for a long time because I do want a nice heart. So a doctor worth his salt or her salt would not immediately go in and say, hey, I've got so many hearts, over here that I can just exchange one for you. They need to figure out the whole person, right? So it's, tell me a bit more about your history, your heart. Do you exercise? Do you not exercise? Do you, all sorts of things before you actually go in to say, actually it's a heart you need, or it's a stent, or actually a lifestyle change. So if I apply that to a business context, a lot of companies will say, hey, we're seeing some problems here, and it's because we don't have a good CRM system. Our data's siloed, we can't pull reports, we don't actually know why we're getting so many returns, and so on and so forth. We need Salesforce, and we think we know what we needed to do. Hey, Salesforce partner, come here and implement this for me. I think we need X, Y, and Z. So that is where issues come about, I believe. Salesforce partners or vendors, software vendors of any kind, this is their bread and butter. We do projects day in, day out. We know what works well, what doesn't work well, and how best to implement according to your business needs. But before we can go in and do what you tell us you want, we need to figure out what the situation is. So you say you're replacing this particular system. Tell me a little bit more. Do we have a connector? Do we have anything that will allow us to migrate properly? What are the unknown unknowns, for want of a better word? So going back to the analogy about the heart, maybe you've got other underlying causes that we need to be extra careful about. So it's the same with software as well. So if you ask a partner to come in and implement a system for you in exactly the way that you say, and you think that it's really simple, but sometimes under simplicity lies a lot of complexity. And a lot of the times I'll say the complexity lies in the human side of the equation and not so much a system. The system is really quite simple. It's a database with a presentation layer and an application layer, and you can configure it to do what you want it to do. But it's the humans, I think I know my processes and it's really simple, and actually it's not. So that's the analogy that I hope will color the picture for you.
That's perfect. And I one of the things I appreciate in the book is how you focus on it not only being that qualifying understanding, understanding the client issues, it's also such an important qualifying step and a process to be able to identify red flags so that as a partner, you can make the right decision whether or not to even take on the project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Which bit specifically?
That qualifying aspect of it, of why the discovery phase is also a really important element to qualifying, identifying red flags, and deciding whether or not to take the project or how to scope it.
Let me extend the analogy about the doctor again, because that just it just makes it so easy. So let's say you've come to me and you've got a problem, and I send you for all sorts of tests to validate what the issue is. And through the tests that you've gone through, I find out actually it's not your heart that's the problem. You actually have a neurological condition. And I, as a doctor of heart, a heart doctor, cardiologist, isn't qualified or experienced to fix the problem that's causing you pain. So it would be remiss of me to actually push on because I want to sell you a new heart. I'm going to, earn a lot of money. It would be remiss of me to carry on doing that because that won't fix your problem. And that if we go back to the situation of implementation partners, those who do that without considering other factors that they might not be a good fit to fix the problem fall into one of two categories. One is they're not experienced enough to know or to say no. And number two, maybe they are more driven by the bottom line than about doing what's best for the project and for the client. So I always say, discovery is good for both sides. One, for the organization to know that the partner that they're engaging is the right one, and for the partner to know that they're stepping into a situation where they can actually make a positive impact.
Oh, that's great. That's so important. And I think that kicks into that idea of that thorough discovery phase, which you advocate for, and then the challenge that many partners run into around kind of the dead time between discovery and project kickoff. Can you share a little bit about the risks that exist in that gap, and then ways of really managing that effectively from an implementation process?
This is such a juicy topic. I can talk about it quite a bit. Right. So one of the things that I also talk about is methodology. You got your waterfall, you have your agile, and then you've got somewhere in between, which is the hybrid methodology. Now, there is a lot of backlash to waterfall because it's rigid. You can't change, and you don't see the system for a long time, and it doesn't lend itself to giving value, right? I can totally see that when it's run in a rigid way. The agile way, now from my point of view, and I'm really open to people telling me otherwise, agile works best for product companies like Salesforce. Think about it, 3 releases a year, and they run an agile way. So you're constantly improving, changing, adding, fixing, so on and so forth. Now, on projects for clients where they're either moving from nothing to something or something to something much better, we're talking about a significant step change. And that step change comes from looking at it as a project. Define beginning, define end. And then you can iterate and make better. So if I think about that way, so it's not a agile methodology full on, then it is useful to also think of the engagement in that way, in that it's not fully agile. So I can see from a lot of partners' point of view, they're focusing on making sure that their team are always billable. And so you're always stressed about this little gap between discovery and implementation. So what I've been telling a lot of partners whom I'm helping at the moment is, don't think of it that way. When you run a discovery, you can tell the client that discovery is going to be a separate team. You start that way. In theory, it could be the same team. But if you begin in that way, number one, it provides an impetus to the organization to try and make their approval processes much quicker. So as soon as you finish discovery, we get that signed off and we can start work. So that gives them that impetus. And if they can't, and a lot of organizations have a much longer approval cycle, they might also be evaluating other vendors, then they should not have any expectation that the same team will be the one doing their implementation when they come around to making that decision. So it's two parts. One is from a partner point of view to change how they message their engagement delivery, and also from the client point of view to understand that no partner is going to, tag and put the discovery team on the bench or waiting for them to make a decision. So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach.
I have found from a consulting perspective, it was a little bit different. Through my career, I've spent time being a product manager at a customer of Salesforce and time as a consultant. And the key thing is, I've seen a lot of companies where we'll do a waterfall, even though I'm not a fan of waterfall. We'll do a waterfall discovery, a fixed period of find everything out, build a backlog, and then manage the implementation in an agile or iterative fashion. I find that that's a lot easier from a scope perspective. People want to add things. I, I think the piece that people look at, or customers, clients look at, are they come to us and they want, hey, we need to go live on date X. Hey, can you replace, pick random products, can you replace HubSpot and get us onto Marketing Cloud so that we don't have to renew our Marketing Cloud, our HubSpot contract on December 31st? Well, you've come to us already with a objective that has nothing to do with functionality, process, features, and it's that mixture of time, resources, people, process, scope that all make a project successful. I'm envisioning a Venn diagram for a blog in the next week. But, if you're trying to balance and bring all of those things together, but you focus on, do I have to know everything to get started? Do I have to know everything to get going with delivery, with implementation? How do you help manage? What's your perspective on managing the fact that you can't take a project that comes to you and says you need to be done by December 31st so that I don't have to renew the next contract and I'm not paying for two products? Do you have a perspective on that?
Absolutely. As a project manager, I think that's a very easy question to answer because I will always pull up the iron triangle. And that iron triangle is, as you say, the relationship between scope, resources, and timeline, right? If they want to change something, the others will change. And I am open, right? Because we're always led by the customer. So if you've asked us to do a discovery on something and then you've had a leadership change or someone that realizes, oh my goodness, our HubSpot's renewing, we don't want it. Can you make it quicker, faster, whatever that might be? And that's fine. It's very human. Things happen. I make very clear what the impact is. You want to change the scope? We can, but this is the impact it's going to make, right? You want to make it quicker. There's going to be an impact. What do you want to de-scope right now? I'm happy to do that, but also recognize that when you make a change, you're going to have technical debt. I have done
I
dance
I
process before as well.
I think technical debt might be the key buzzword, to kind of shift from that foundation into the next segment of the podcast, or today, the structure here around lessons learned. When we look through your um, book and the material and getting ready, um, I have found that people tend to learn more at times from their mistakes, what they've done wrong, rather than their successes. They improve and find a way forward to continue to do things better. So I have two different primary questions in the lessons learned around discovery. Your book goes into showing how, the requirements, when they're gathered, the use cases or user stories affect all of those project phases. And you'll have clients who are eager to jump right into implementation as soon as they start to tell you what they want to have done. How does a well executed discovery contribute to basically a smoother project delivery and a better client relationship? What's your perspective there?
I think this would be very much in the domain of a business analyst who is very strong in stakeholder management. When we run discoveries, we we should find out what their final outcome should be. It shouldn't be the client's job to tell us how to execute it. So it might be, as a Salesforce, sorry, as a sales administrator, I would like the ability to click a button and have this flow do X for me. Now, that's not a great requirement because you are asking for a method of delivering a feature. It should be, I need the ability to very quickly see all the opportunities and which part of the pipeline that they're actually pinched on. That is the requirement. And it should be up to the project team to act, to figure it out, to solutionize it out. So when a client comes to us and say, they want to jump straight into implementation, want to know the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts, I would go back to, as the business analyst, to say, let me make sure that I understand what your pain point is and what outcome you want and how we get there. Rest assured that we will find the best way to do it, either making sure that you're future proof because you have all these other things that's going to come online, or we're going to look at what your peers in your industry and how they're doing it. It's likely to have a golden process that most insurance company do, or most banking organizations, do for claims or refunds. Then we would recommend that, and then we can make sure that that fits into your profile. So this, as trusted advisors, and that's what consultants and partners are, we have to do that. So again, going back to the doctor analogy, you don't want to tell the doctor that it's a new heart or a stent that you want. You want to be able to trust that the doctor knows exactly what they're doing, given that they understand everything about you.
Yeah, and I like that aspect of agile or iterative development, right? Even the concept of the business is the what and the technicians are the how, right? I tend to resist user stories or requirements that dictate how something should be delivered rather than, as you said, describing the problem. But there are often, taking from the lessons learned and making the project smoother and the client relationships and stakeholder management. The projects don't go red overnight. It's not I went to bed on Friday and I wake up Monday morning and the project's red. There are, you know, domino one gets tipped over at some point, right? That eventually leads to where all the dominoes are scattered and things are perhaps problematic. So how would you guide or consultants to avoid the common mistakes that or strategies you'd recommend for handling difficult stakeholders? And I'm putting it out there, like admitting, like sometimes our stakeholders, our customers, are difficult, and things are uncovered throughout discovery. So, what's your guidance there? For avoiding that or managing the pieces you have to balance.
That question is very common, by the way. So if I share with you something else about, so when I introduce myself, there's a line item that I usually say, which is, apart from being a consultant and a project manager, so for the last 15 years, I have volunteered as a Samaritan's listener. So Samaritans in the UK is a crisis phone line for people who are feeling suicidal and who are going through emotional distress. I can say, looking back, when I started my volunteering services, my projects rarely got read, and that is very true. And when I look back, I believe the one of the key skills that I learned was how to listen properly, and I would coach my team to do exactly that: active listening, without judgment, without bias, without trying to solve the problem initially, right? So those are the key things that stops escalation of conflict. If the conflict occurs, and let's talk about a normal conflict. Usually, frustration is born out of not being heard. If I look at discoveries and I look at stakeholders and end users who are frustrated, who are angry, who are upset, usually it's because they've not been heard in some shape or form. And so, as a consultant, when we're coming in, we can just sit down and go, I can hear that this is difficult for you, that me sitting here asking you about your job is difficult for you. Can you just talk me through what you're feeling right now? So, I would call myself a one trick pony, and this is the only tool I have, but it's a tool that really works. When when conflict is high, we take a pause and you truly listen, not just pretend. You will find, and me and my team, all the teams that I've helped and coach and train, have found that escalation is not, when it does happen, it's usually way out of anyone's control anyway. The bigger things at play. But about, I would say, 70-80% of conflict driven discussions can be de escalated very gently through active listening.
Awesome. I thank you very much for sharing that. I want to be cognizant of we are running this live and we have a question from the audience. So I'm going to go off script or the plan, the way we were going to break down your book with the audience and jump right into Yash Paul's question about how do you handle situations like delivering bad news to a client?
Thank you, Yashpal. Let me just begin with something that doesn't sound related, but it is, and it's a saying that my dad always says, and he was in the Air Force, and it's a bit crude, but let me sanitize it. So basically, if you want to do a number two, you don't want to be digging the hole. You want to have already planned things out, right? So when we're talking about project, as a project manager, and I train project managers this, you want to already create a good rapport with the client so that they understand that you are on their side. You're not there to earn money, just earn money. You're not there to cheat them or to take advantage of them. You are there in it with them. So when bad news comes up, it's not a here you go, this is a problem, this is going to cost you so much to fix. No, here you go, we have a problem. Me and my team have come up with a few options and ideas, and let's talk it through and how to move it forward. You see, when you have created that relationship, that rapport, delivering bad news isn't difficult because the other person is on your side. They know that you are there to help them, not like a finger pointing blame game that goes on in a lot of projects. So, again, if you bring it right back to the basic, it's about active listening and about creating that human connection. It just makes all this stuff like stumbles, like it just kind of disappears. I hope that answered the question.
I do believe you're driving towards a very um, important aspect of that, and I think that this goes with not just our client relationships and our professional space of dealing Salesforce projects. It's you make deposits or investments in people, whether you're mentoring them, whether you're at church, whether you're family or whatnot. And sometimes, though, you need to make a withdrawal, right? Sometimes you can't give as much. Sometimes you're the person who's stressed. Sometimes you're the person who has to apologize. And I think that what you're describing of how you consistently support and put a client first, that transparency, serving them in that fashion builds a level of client intimacy. And when something goes awry, it's easier to understand like you're wanting to help move everybody through that current situation, the bad news as it may be, right? If it's If you're not regularly demonstrating that you're supportive of someone, they're they're not able to see the ebb and flow and give back and forth. So I think that Yash Paul's question helped head us into a topic that I know you're passionate about in the book as well. And I felt connected to what you had to say because I believe the soft skills are important, very, very important when finding a consultant. It's hard to teach commitment, it's hard to teach resilience, it's hard to teach um, at times even communication. Technical skills are easy to pick up. I can sit a team down and show them how to navigate resources on Trailhead or the partner learning community and learn revenue lifecycle management, even if it's a brand new product. But I can't teach them not to be frustrated on a call with the customer, right? So, in your work, you've discussed the importance of emotional intelligence and critical thinking in consulting. Can you share your insights, navigating the challenges of discovery, the phase when you speak up to someone when you believe they're wrong? And how does navigating these soft skills impact the success of a project?
Thank you for bringing that up. It was a question that I was discussing with a few people last week. There's a couple of things. One is doing discovery and in consulting, and the two things I train my team. Number one is to never ever assume anything, even in discovery. If you're unsure about something, you need to ask and find out and get clarity. And the other one is managing expectations. So if we just focus on the first one, which is not to assume anything. So if during a discovery someone says something that you believe is incorrect, do you step out and say it? Do you clear the air, so to speak, so that the discovery, we're all on the right space? I would say that that's very context driven. And the reason why I say this is because as a project manager, so I teach power and politics in my program as well, in understanding the concept of influence. As a project manager, I have multiple power bases. So again, I talk about this in my training. So there's the formal power bases are you have the carrot, you got a stick, and you got authority. So the carrot and the stick are your bonus and your bad performance review, for example. And authority is what I have as a project manager, and I can say, hey, Mr. Salesperson, that is incorrect. We will be doing it this way for this reason. And obviously I need to make sure that I've got rapport as well, so that doesn't put them in a negative feeling. So I have enough charm that usually I can get away with things like that. It's not something that I would teach someone very junior, because there is power politics and group dynamic at play. So if you imagine a situation where you have a graduate who's just done a trailhead on a particular module, so they are the most well trained on a particular topic, maybe, and they're in a discovery, and you've got a technical architect who may have missed this bit, and they are telling the client something that the new graduate knows is not quite true. Now, should they say, hey, Mr. TA, I don't believe that's true because this is what I learned, right? So you have to understand context. That will create not a great atmosphere, especially if the senior member of the team isn't open to this sort of feedback when the client is on the same call. So there's a lot of things to think about. So it's not something I would jump in and say, always do that. No, you need to know what's happening and to find out, maybe to just hold back and ask about it outside of the environment. Speak to someone who is safe to ask about what should I do because the TA just said something that is not absolutely not correct. We're going to get in trouble if the client carries on believing this thing. So there are different ways of stepping forward to making sure that the correct information is disseminated so that the discovery and the project run successfully.
I, I, I like it resonates. What you said resonates. Like I can think back to a particular experience where the context in the room and in the TA role at that time, and a junior person is in there and wants to do something different. They have to, you have to be cognizant or aware of your surroundings and situation, because sometimes if the client is observing that disconnect, there it erodes the confidence in the team as a whole. And what's the good of your serving? Everybody has to set down their individual identity and work a project from the perspective of, we represent company X. We don't represent the success of Joseph or Chelyn or Pei Mun individually. We represent the success of the Salesforce Bookshelf podcast today, right? And having that come about. It's like that on any project or delivery. So, um, what do you have? I'm going to ask, this is unplanned, but one more question. Do you have a soft skills book that you find is like your most inspirational to you, that you would recommend around emotional intelligence or leadership or soft skills above and beyond your own book, that you would recommend to people?
I think this one, Daniel Goleman one, is really good. But it's so that's another of my book in the pipeline, which has to do with leadership and emotional intelligence, specifically around delivering projects, consulting, and dealing with clients. But that one is a really, really good book that fleshes out what all the quadrants are: the social intelligence, the self self regulation, self regulating, which is emotional mastery, self awareness, and then you got social intelligence, social awareness, and the connection. So all of it together, builds a person who is influential and who is charismatic, who can get away with a lot. So when I talk about power base, I know one of my power base is that I'm quite likable and I get away with much more than a lot of other people can. So I have to be very cognizant of that as well. So I can't tell people to do what I do because it doesn't work for a lot of people. So that book is a great one to get started with, and then my book will come in a couple of years.
And that's what I was going to say. Did you dropped a hint? You're writing another book, and it'll be when?
Actually, I shouldn't say that. I have 7 books in mind. So this is book one. So it's a color of the rainbow, right? So this is red. Red is the first one. Then there's orange. There's 7 books. I'm planning the last one is project management because it's by. So my character has the different head
Wow.
color. So I will be focusing on different aspects, and I will be releasing them as and when. Yeah. So leadership and EI will be one of those books.
Wow. I am blown away about the vision to do that. Really blown away. That is amazing. All right. I'm going to turn it back over to Shellin, to kind of bring us through the last couple topics in the home stretch here, so that we can be cognizant of our audience's time and your time. Shellin.
Yes. And I'm going to go a little rogue because it really captured my attention that you include the politics in your trainings. And I'm curious, do you find that the teams that you work with have ever had kind of a formalized training around the political dynamics?
There isn't one. There's um, it's very so for me as a project manager in the UK, so we have a lot of offshore teams in India. India, like Malaysia, where I'm from, is an ex-British colony. So there's a lot of cultural, historical shadows that still is cast in the organizational politics that I'm very, very deeply aware of, and I know how to navigate. And again, that's how come I get really great results from my team in India or in Philippines, Malaysia, because I'm really aware. So this is something I know is not taught. I did this module during my MBA while working in an organization with offshore teams, which is why I felt it really important to include in my training, because that allows leadership. So when I'm talking to practice directors of partners, they can understand how to remove the political distance, the barriers created by political, no, is that right? Yeah, political difference between, between the different levels and between the client and us and what's happening in the offshore team, for example. So I just think that that's really important, and no one's kind of like talking or teaching about it. So I felt that it's something to include. And also with this time with mergers and acquisitions, and we see so much of that happening, you will also understand organizational dynamics within that and why and how things happen. And if you're caught up in it, what to do.
Yeah, fascinating. One of the opportunities I had working alongside of a recruiting team is hearing directly from leaders who are bringing on, projects and hiring consultants and employees, and that dynamic of being in 4 or 5 generations as well. So you have this global impact and just this complete different ability to communicate dynamics that are appropriate. That's tremendous that you're teaching that. One of the things that you come to the table with is this sort of depth and breadth. You've had the technical roles, you've had the, more high level. Can you share a little bit about sort of the challenges or the opportunities around going a little wider versus deeper in terms of expertise as somebody's approaching their consulting career?
I think it's very interesting because I wrote a post about wide and deep a couple of days ago, and I've been having a lot of conversations. It's interesting that that post generated so much resonance with a lot of people, but I would kind of like I think a lot of people focus very much, should I go wide or should I go deep? And I think that that misses the point, in that I think you should look for something that really captures you, that really engages you. It could be as simple as, I really love doing demos, or I really love training, or I really love nonprofit cloud, whatever that might be. Just find something that captures you and just get good at it, and see where that takes you. Because you can say, I want to be over here, but the path of life doesn't always take you directly there. So it might take you adjacent there. But as long as you're true to your value, whatever that is, and you join companies whose value align with yours, you will get to a place where you are lucky enough, like me, to say, hey, do I want to go wide or deep? Or it might be, I find myself in the wide space and thinking all the steps I got there, and this is great. I'm enjoying this because I followed my passion in terms of the cloud or the thing I want to do, and I just got really good at it. And maybe I might think, oh, I've had enough of this. Let me spread my wings and go somewhere different. But focusing on wide or deep right now when you're starting just seems like you're putting energy somewhere where you could refocus and have it do more for you.
It's incredible advice. And I think it resonates with prospects and clients as well, that if you have that interest or passion in what you're doing, you bring that energy and build that trust and can create just much better projects. One of the things that you are known for in social media and in your book is the use of illustrations, images, visuals, charts. Can you share a little bit more about how you can use those things to really have a much more successful project?
Yes, absolutely. I follow a guy called Dan Rome, and he does a lot of really good illustration, and he wrote quite a few books on how to illustrate even when you think you are not great at drawing, how to illustrate an idea with shapes and with stick figures and with arrows. And so I bought his books, and I thought there's lots of things that I want to say, and I think if I can say it in a picture, it would transmit better, because I'm also quite a visual person. And so I started doing this, and I found that if I can convey that in a picture, that means I've understood it enough to be able to answer questions. So that was more a benchmark for my yardstick for myself.
Mhm. Interesting. So that's a great way to look at it, as helpful for the person, but also for yourself, and making sure that you are able to be clear enough to put it in a visual. I haven't thought of that before. It's interesting. And what would you say, how your book can kind of complement certifications or leveraging, Trailhead, just that ability to yours and others with authors and their books to kind of augment somebody's knowledge and success?
I think it's a supplement. You do need hard knowledge and competency, because that's what the client's hiring us to do, to build a supercar, to build this amazing thing that will do wonderful things for us. So we need that skill set as well, but it goes to waste if you aren't asking the right question, and your client actually really wants a racehorse and you built them a race car. So I think that it helps to make sure that you're on the right track to building something great. And Salesforce is such a complex tool and such an amazing tool, and it's so fun. So I'm part of me is feeling slight regret that I no longer do like real hands-on stuff that I used to. But there are other people who are doing that, and it can do great things, but you need to be asking the right question and to be listening properly and be connecting on a human level, um, before we can be sure that we are solving the right problem.
It's such a great opportunity to have a mentor. If anyone's lucky enough to work with you, that's a tremendous opportunity, or to take your courses and to learn from you, but to be able to kind of read your thoughts, and that labor of love of creating a book is tremendous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chelyn, for diving into that. Hey, Mon, last question. We'll wrap up kind of with this, because it's prevalent in daily discussions, right? You can't really get away from AI, right? So we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you your perspective on how AI is going to change discovery.
It's such an interesting question. A lot of people have been talking about it. One of my reservations about LLM is that it makes people believe that it's really easy to do things. You can ask it to generate questions for you to ask during your discovery. You can ask it to write user stories for you based on a conversation. But we master a skill through mistakes, through trying a lot of things, falling down. All of us have scars and, emotional and psychological scars of trying something, learning, and knowing why it didn't work to get the right answer. Now, what we're robbing people of with AI is that journey, that learning process, because AI will give you an answer that sounds about right, and you will take it and you will use it, not knowing why it's right. And the value in all of us in doing things the hard way is the learning and the mistakes that we make. So I would say use AI with caution. So for someone like me and those who are experienced in whatever they're doing, you can take that and you can accelerate it because I know when it's doing or saying something wrong. But for those who are just up and coming, new in the industry, in a BA role, in a consulting role, it can help you with basics to get you to, let's say, a B minus standard. And if you want to be A plus in this, you will have to do the hard work and you'll need to learn how to use AI in the right context, but don't rely on it to make you A plus. You need to rely on yourself and on making those painful mistakes, those that I call character building ones, to actually, be the A plus.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. I think that that resonates to quite a few of the things we talked about today, lessons learned and difficult conversations, emotional intelligence, and whatnot throughout discovery, the soft skills. So, ending on character building, I think, is a good spot for the day. I want to thank you again for taking time to join us and talk a little bit about that. The QR code is up on the screen right now. We'll be including a link to it on the blog post when we're done. The podcast will be available soon. Chelyn, thank you for joining me today. Pei Mom, thank you very much for being here. Any final words from either of you two ladies?
Well, safe travels. I know that you are headed out. Both of you are traveling today. So it was really, really a pleasure.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you both for having
You're
me.
welcome.
It's super, super fun uh, talking about all these topics that that I enjoy talking about. So I could talk them to the cows come home. If I didn't have a flight to catch, I'd still be here tomorrow.
All right. Well, thank you all. Everybody, have a wonderful afternoon or evening, morning, wherever you are around our glorious world. Thanks for joining us. We'll